experienced is when we have silos in our own businesses and we're not connected, we look like fools in front of our customers. It's just, the cringe of it is just dire. I see a lot of head nods. And so how can we, as almost the frontline customer-facing interaction person, align people so that we're showing up with a kind of common message and common purpose, and also align people on the customer end to make a decision, whether it's a big renewal, whether it's potential expansion, etc., making sure that all the ingredients are there and everyone's aligned on what we're trying to achieve. So for me, one good example, I used to work very closely. We had a 7-figure key customer, and they wanted a quarterly review with their head of product. It was a Series A, so it's not, I know different companies have different size, but we could put in the head of product to do a roadmap update. Every single time, I would actually give him an update on where they were, what they were unhappy with, so that he could tailor and not just do a generic roadmap presentation, but actually, what we're building, this is what you told us, this is the thing we're building as a result of that. And of course, some things that they want, they're not going to get, but have a logic for, they're likely to push back and be unhappy that this thing isn't resolved. What's the narrative you're going to say? And most of the time, those meetings went really well and actually strengthened the relationship, because anything we were doing was done through the lens of that context. But that requires a lot of work from customer success to curate and contextualize so that everyone's on the same page. And again, for me, that's been an area that's not always a given that this is done well. Also, do we have the credibility internally to be able to pull in the people that we need, and can they listen to what we say?
You've also got the person that fills this role on the other side of the business, because
Yes.
I've had it before where you think it's person X and that they say, oh, I'll go and get the X, Y, and Z in this call, and then actually you end up being like, oh, have you done that? No. Okay, how are we going to have this call?
Yes.
If you've asked for whatever reason, particularly when the context for this is that it was a very project driven, so we were doing work with them and there was a project move into a unusually really positive place, and they kept asking calls, and then the person I thought was the orchestrator at their end and said, oh, I'm going to own all this, and you're like, great, cool, you're happy, and then didn't do it, and then that's what then you then have to, okay, how do I get round to almost and dealing with all of that nonsense that goes with that.
Very relatable. And I think that's the thing, we can orchestrate internally, but to your point, how do we get the customer side to orchestrate? And to your point again, if someone is supposed to be doing that job and isn't, it's complicated, but it requires, you can see how judgment focused this is. How do you read the room, so to speak? How do you look at the non-verbal signals and the politics that happen there that are likely to be influencing what's happening behind the scenes?
Particularly when you've got, so this was a complex corporate, it was the company that I was dealing with got bought out. And while that was a good relation, actually we were very bullish about it, you end up having two different sets of stakeholders that ultimately want two different things.
Yes.
And navigating that.
It's really complex.
Very fun, question mark.
And yet, I don't think there's any way around this stuff, right? It's a key part of what it is to be showing up and managing a customer relationship. But yes, if it doesn't have legs for me, the thing is that it's just a bona fide coordinator role. And so how do you make sure that it actually has the strategic importance, as in you have the voice, or that your teams have the voice to be able to put in the right people, and also that you have that credibility on your customer side, because essentially it's being really prescriptive with two sets of stakeholders.
Emily?
Yes?
Apologies if you're concerned. All profiles.
Yeah. To be honest, the orchestrator is probably a higher EQ role, because it's really reading the people and the dynamics of the relationship. I would say the strategic thinker, which was on the previous page, that's an IQ role. It's an IQ role, but it's trainable to an extent. It's more like, can you think strategically? If I give you the tools, do you have the basics to analyze an annual report? Not to be a financial analyst, but can you read a CEO's letter to shareholders and highlight what are the three things they care about and how my product actually allows them to deliver on the three things they care about or not? So, whereas the other two roles, I think the operator has a degree of EQ because you're dealing with people, and the troubleshooter is probably an IQ as well, like someone who's deeply technical and deeply knows the product. That's the people who can pull magic out of a hat are people who really know what's going on. You can troubleshoot to the nth degree very quickly. So you're right, it's a real mix of the two, and I think that's what makes customer success such a complex role, is there's partly like a technical and numerical piece, and then there's another piece that's commercial, and ultimately there's a piece around how we manage and articulate human relationships that actually make this thing work. Regardless of how many tools we have, I think you cannot take the human out of this. That's part of my AI piece.
I do think, just on that as well, that because I would challenge a little bit on what you were saying about strategic thinker, but that's maybe just because how I thought about it. For me, the strategic bit comes from reading what that person is saying to you, and when I go through this process, I have a knowledge-account call with them basically every year, and what's your goals for the year and all that stuff. But actually, it's kind of what they're not saying as well, and that's quite an emotion. That's that EQ piece.
Yeah.
And what's this person not telling me? And reading that and inferring that. And you're right, some of it will be statistically driven because they'll do a press announcement saying, I don't know, all of a sudden X amount of our company's been laid off or something. That's obviously a big red signal. But sometimes it's not even as brutal as that. It's someone maybe says something and you go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And that might, and then you can back around. But that's how I think about strategic. It's also what is someone not saying, and that's
Right.
an EQ piece.
Yeah, that's very much, and you're right. I think it is good. This is exactly what I want. It's like, it's a frame, but it's definitely not set in stone in any way. I would also say, though, that we're so used to going, what's your priority for the year? And I would challenge on the other side to go and look at what they've said in the press, come with an educated hypothesis and validate that, because you show up so much more credibly when you're not just going, what was your priorities? Oh, I saw this and this. I suspect it means this for you. Is that right? And they're like, ooh, either they're like, you're spot on, or they're like, that's a really good angle we hadn't thought of. So you start to elevate that's how you get to the executive buyers, when you start to push that thinking. But again, you have to be with the right level. So I think it's a both and, that strategic piece. You're absolutely right.
I think more than any of the other four, you need both. They all need both. There's no two ways about it. I feel like that one specifically, it needs that balance, that elevation of both.
Would your advice be to unlock those more decision makers if you've, let's say, got an account with not so many? Because sometimes you have to fine tune, like you might have really technical folk, and you're trying to get to their manager, but there's a bit of a silo between what they want and the manager wants. So if that makes sense.
I always find, like, lead with so this is where it's also the EQ piece is huge, is who is the person I'm trying to speak to? What do they care about? So what's on the manager's list? What are their pain points? And so you almost have to contextualize how you talk about the value you deliver based on the stakeholder that you're trying to get to. So if you're with a deeply technical, so often I found like your day-to-day contact is a product owner, but actually you have a senior business owner who has a call to make. The way you're going to speak to the business owner is going to be quite different to the metrics that a product owner would care about. So I would adapt. So this is again where the EQ plus the data comes in, which is start with obviously the business context, then layer the person that you're trying to speak to, figure out what they're on the hook for, what they care about, and then whatever you reach out, it isn't a generic message that you'd send to everyone. You would contextualize for what that person cares about, because that, again, creates that connection where they'll pay attention. And it's also out of the scope of the person who's technical, so they won't necessarily feel like you're sidestepping. It's like, oh, I see that you're trying to achieve X, Y, and Z, angle for what we do that I think might be helpful. Would love to walk you through it. That's how I would do it.
Thank you, that's helpful.
So, yes, this, as I said, is essentially the intersection. So it's that mix that you would want to see. So still the deep technical knowledge and the ability to react when you need to react. I think it's not dismissing that troubleshooter and operator are not needed. They're essential, but it's more often it's the weighting that we have is too much on those and less on the other two. So having the operator, yes, but also because the process piece, we need that consistency in the way that we're delivering across our customers. I think that's really important. The judgment piece of the strategic thinker, that layer of how do we think of the bigger picture and the facts, and then look at the non-verbal. And finally, how we make sure that we're aligning, getting all the ducks in a row, another like klaxon for the corporate words that we were talking about earlier. So it's more about when we think about architecting that, what does a team look like? What's the mix? How do we think about maybe which profiles we have already, and how the next piece you'll see is about how do we potentially develop in the job or on the job how to create experiences for people so that they can build those skills. Because I honestly think in most cases, I mean, some people can't, but in many cases it's just because they haven't been exposed to or haven't had the experience. So yeah, it's basically a choice and a development outcome, and often I think that's where it's the challenge is. What I haven't got in here is the stats, but essentially if we need to make a business case for why should we be spending more time on the proactive value-added work, how do we maybe look at pivoting away from some of the more transactional reactive, and this is a whole AI conversation that's coming up, if, and hopefully AI is taking away some of the more transactional work, what space gets left? And rather than going, oh, we don't need as many headcount, which is very limiting, and I have a whole issue with people replacing people or saying they can replace people with AI. Instead, in my view, how do we free up that capability to do much more value-added, judgment-based work? So how can we upskill our people? Because that's where we can have that impact and not lose that customer we got blindsided by. So, yeah, I'm just thinking, given what we've just shared, for those of you who have teams, where would you say your teams sit?
Oh, one-man band.
So you're everything.
They want me to be everything.
That's the other problem, right? You should be the account manager, the technical account manager, or the solutions and implementation person, the onboarding, the support. Yeah. Any other?
Yeah, some of it does depend, I'd say, on what else is in the organisation.
Yes.
If you've got a really clear support divide, then that helps. A lot of companies don't. Or support is too unresponsive compared to CS, that they lean towards CS because they know they get a faster response. So a lot of it does come down to that divide.
I do think this is also there are organisational choices that are made, right? And we probably don't necessarily agree because we see where there are some gaps. And yeah, the support success piece, I definitely know when I was in startup mode, we didn't have support per se. We had kind of solutions analysts who were more in between, kind of support but not support, and it was a real bone of contention where those things were being handled.
Yeah, because some organisations will have CS and then around it they'll have a technical account manager, they'll have a support channel, and then they'll have an account manager as well.
Yeah.
And they are less reliant on CS from a troubleshooting perspective because they've got so many other channels. If it's finance, I'll go to the account manager. If it's to do with my bill, if it's to do with technical insight or whatever, they'll go to support or they'll go to a TAM.
Yeah.
But in smaller organisations, it all comes to
It's
CS.
all one thing, right? So we're not all AWS.
Exactly.
So that's, I think, a really good point to make, that the answer to that is on the size of the organisation, the level of resources, and also how customer success is perceived by the powers that be that we report into. Often they say they want strategic, but they still want you to do all of the other stuff instead. So yeah, the idea is that it's a mirror, not Band-Aid. So I wanted it to be woven as a conversation rather than just having a point, but really helpful, for example, that I had more of that IQ led on the strategic and that you push back on that. And I guess it's one thing here is, as I looked at these kind of 4 roles and the capability in the middle, is there something glaringly obvious that's missed from that profile?
Just because it does sometimes fall into the realms, and James touched on the technical piece as well, which I know is all that troubleshooter.
Yeah.
It's not always, because it can be, because in my head that troubleshooter is, it's when something has gone wrong, the nature of the word there, but actually sometimes the TAM piece and how we blend with that, and I'm sure we've all been in roles where there isn't a TAM, so you've got to be there.
Yeah.
And so it's that as well. So it's having that technical knowledge to drive some of the other stuff as well. I do think that then you end up very quickly overwhelmed as a CS person if you've got to know the product inside and out and sideways, be strategic, be reactionary as well, and manage a contract, and you just end up in no one person or even 3 or 4 people. Yeah.
That's a really valid point. That's where I think my lens of very high touch human shows that I think I had a blind spot there and where I would typically have seen that, but I agree that there is a degree of technical pieces that you have to consider. And what about implementation? So if you don't have a solutions team or a TAM, all of that element where you might have a specific project or an additional implementation that happens, that ends up being under CS because that's what... If you're a one-man band, that's another hat for you to wear, right?
Project manager.
Project manager, yeah, absolutely, actually, because that would be, if there's fixed value-added or add-ons to the ongoing relationship that require more high-touch or hand-holding for a period of time. That is almost project managing something technical on top of the day-to-day. So how do you juggle when you've got someone who really needs deep attention and everyone else needs a bit of that ongoing at the same time?
The one question I would ask is, out of those roles, the customer's bought your product or solution for a reason,
Yeah.
so they've got a definition of success.
Yes,
Who's responsible for them achieving that out of those roles?
the customer business partner, so the one in the middle.
Okay.
But essentially, I would say probably down the line, it's really the operator. As in, tell me what your goal and tell me what your vision of success is. And it's my role as an operator to make sure that we're tracking whether we are delivering what you've promised, what we've promised you as definition of success. And it's my responsibility to review, maybe at a quarterly level, whether your definition of success has changed or not. So I guess, yeah, that's the real answer is the operator is where I would expect that responsibility to sit, which is why it's such a probably more common or key part of what you see in the role.
Yeah. Okay. There's just, in a previous world, there was a temptation to go for the strategic upsell,
Yeah.
forgetting they haven't actually achieved why they bought it in the first
Yeah.
place. And then you just create very weird tension whereby you've got this divide, this push and pull between, we want you to buy more, but hang on a minute, I haven't actually achieved what I bought you
Yeah.
for in the first place.
This is where I think there's a real tension as well between like where CS shouldn't be sales, because you should be detecting growth by proving the value that you promised to the customer.
Yeah, it should be natural, right?
It should be like, for me, the commercial angle of customer success is you're there to deliver what was promised and you do it well, which provides you with it's this idea of sell on success. You've delivered something fantastic, you've overachieved on their expectations. You're the person in the room who's there when they're happy to say, actually, we've done something that would make it even better. Would you be interested? But to your point, if you're basically setting unrealistic commercial targets whilst also expecting, chances are people then short-circuit the value that you need to create at the base to try and get to that upsell, and that erodes the trust, and down the line, that customer's going to churn, or certainly they're not going to invest more with you if you're not delivering what you're promising.
Yeah, the perception of you's gone from trusted advisor to salesperson, right?
That's the thing, and I really think, having been in sales roles and customer success, that you need a boundary, and so a lot of this hinges on the quality of the relationship between customer success and the commercial part. Be it, if it's a smaller business, it's normally an AE, it's an account manager if it's a bigger business. How connected are you? Are you aligned, and do you have common goals so that you're not pulling in a different direction, essentially? And that's not always guaranteed. Many other organizations don't have people pulling in the same direction. It's a really big problem. When I speak to founders, I'm like, are you aligning people towards the same outcome? Because otherwise, you're eroding customer trust, and that's where the problem is not your customer success team, it's your entire system and the way you've chosen not to design it by default, which causes problems. And actually, interestingly, I always thought it was more of a startup problem, but I recently been speaking to a private equity-backed 100 million, 150 million turnover company. They don't have any of this in place either. It's chaos. They have 31 client success managers. They have different reporting lines between account management and client success in one of their regions, so these two people don't even really speak or trust each other. And I think it's because no one's aligned on what's the common version of who we are, what we deliver, what we stand for, and how all these different capabilities can then align and work together to drive the same outcome. That's why since I've left my practitioner role is work with people to try and figure out the system and a common view. It's not easy. There's often people like, oh, we'll do it later. But actually that's probably the single biggest thing that's causing customer growth to stall is not having that mechanism to enable people to do their best work in front of customers. Bit of a tangent. I just want to talk a bit about some experiences that we can practically build in to make sure that we are building the full range of capabilities. So essentially, these are the 5 experiences that I think can help elevate for people who are if we can't change the system at the moment, what can we do to try and build that into the teams we already have, or for ourselves? So first of all, actually having some skin in the game in terms of the commercial outcome, I think is really important. I've got a story for that. Having a customer that you can, that's great, you get the glory if they do well, but actually it's also yours to lose. So it's similar to skin in the game, but It is about that exposure to higher stakes outcomes that the business cares about. Then you have the idea of cross-functional work, so it touches on a little bit of what we talked about, how you can get involved partnering maybe with product on something